Look, quick reminder before we dive in. I'm not your therapist. I'm just obsessed with the science. The science behind why we, and I mean we, do weird things. Okay? True story. I genuinely need to confess something embarrassing right now. I spent 2 full hours, literally 2 hours, pacing my apartment, rehearsing an argument with someone who wasn't there. The person didn't even remember the conversation. I'd won exactly nothing. But here's the thing. I wasn't being irrational. Not even close. You've done this. Maybe not 2 hours, but you've done this. The pacing, the muttering, the full cinematic arguments with people who seriously wronged you, maybe 3 years ago, right? And then the shame. Why am I like this? Why can't I just stop? And here's what nobody tells you. Your heart is actually racing. You're sweating. Your body is exhausted from nothing. Here's the thing. What we just described, it actually has a name. Maladaptive Daydreaming. Coined by Professor Eli Sommer. And it is not what you think. It's about something called the default mode network, a mechanism called predictive coding. And together, they explain everything. Welcome back to Wired Behavior, where we ruin your self-blame with science. Here's the part that's going to genuinely change how you see yourself. We're covering the default mode network, predictive coding, and why your body pays for wars that never happen. Okay, so most of us assume the brain just records things, right? It doesn't. That's the entire problem. Your brain is not a recording device. It's a prediction machine, a statistical organ. It's constantly guessing, every second of every day. It's making predictions about what happens next. Carl Friston at UCL calls it active inference. The brain minimizes what he calls prediction error, the gap between expected and real. I want to show you what this actually looks like. This is your default mode network. This part, the medial prefrontal cortex, is basically the director. It writes the scripts of your imagined social scenarios. 3 hubs, all firing, all the time, in you. The brain builds what Carl Friston calls a generative model. Basically, it's running drafts of reality before reality happens. Every social situation you walk into, your brain already has a draft. It sent one ahead of you, without asking. When reality doesn't match the prediction, that gap, that's a prediction error, and the brain hates that gap. Here's where it gets personal. The brain's predictions are built on something called priors. Priors are your past experiences, compressed into predictions. The brain uses what happened before to guess what's coming next. But if your past was threatening, if you grew up in chaos, hostility, unpredictability, the priors go dark. The generative model defaults to people are unsafe, the world is hostile, and the brain starts simulating that world constantly. And here's the part that matters. You know it isn't real. Your brain's reality check system, still working, still intact. It's just overwhelmed. And that overwhelm has a physiological price tag. We just went somewhere together, and your body, it registered that, slightly. There is a structure in your brain, the amygdala, that does not care about context. It cannot tell the difference between a tiger running at you and a conversation you're replaying in your head. Welcome to threat simulation theory, Antti-Revonsuo's work. Revonsuo's argument is this: dreaming evolved as a simulation engine, a practice ground for threats your ancestors actually needed to survive. Children raised in threatening environments, Revonsuo's studies show, have dramatically more frequent, more severe threat content in their dreams. When the amygdala signals danger, real or imagined, it fires the HPA axis. Every single time. Epinephrine, norepinephrine. In your blood, right now, from a thought. If the imagined scenario keeps running, the hypothalamus releases CRH, pituitary releases ACTH, and cortisol floods the bloodstream. Sustained cortisol is neurotoxic to the hippocampus, your memory structure, your focus. That's the brain fog. That's what's happening. The exhaustion after 2 hours in your head is not weakness. It's molecular. Your body ran a war for nothing. All of this is the survival glitch, the system working against itself. Ravonsuo's extended research shows the simulation system doesn't stay in dreams. The DMN pulls it right into waking hours. Summer and Otgar found this. 51% of high-level MD individuals had confused imagined events with real ones. Source confusion. The pacing. It's not random. Monotone movement gives the nervous system highly predictable sensory data, freeing the cortex to simulate. Your reality check system, the corollary discharge, is still working. You know it isn't real. You're just overwhelmed. Look, this is where it starts to shift, but knowing the mechanism doesn't answer why we can't stop. That's what we look at next. Okay, we've covered the mechanism. Now I want to talk about the loop. Here's the part nobody writes about in the academic papers. The shame, not just I feel bad about the pacing. Something deeper, darker. Guilt says, I did something bad. Shame says, I am something bad. That difference is everything. Shame activates 3 specific regions: the posterior cingulate cortex, the medial prefrontal cortex, and the anterior insula, all at once. The anterior insula translates emotional pain directly into physical sensation. That tightness in your chest when you replay something awful, that's the insula. Your brain making shame physical. Sociologist Charles Cooley described what he called the looking glass self. We see ourselves through the imagined eyes of others, and in Maryland, the judge lives inside the loop. When cortisol floods the prefrontal cortex, your inner critic gets a neurological loudspeaker. Shame triggers a cortisol spike. That spike suppresses the prefrontal cortex. The part that does logic goes offline. And without logic available, the looking glass self becomes the only mirror you have. The loop isn't broken behavior. It's maintenance for an overwhelmed system. The brain doesn't run the loop to torture you. It runs it to cope. 3 ways the loop pays the brain. 1, imagined victory releases dopamine. 2, anger discharge burns off suppressed energy. 3, self-punishment creates the illusion of control. Beating yourself up at least feels like doing something about a powerless situation. Here's what the loop is actually protecting. The original wound. Connection that didn't hold. The brain doesn't replay old arguments because it's broken. It's still trying. This mechanism, as brutal as it is, kept you functioning. Research on adverse childhood experiences shows clearly the environments that built your priors were not your design, not your fault. And yet, the circumstances have changed. The loop hasn't. The same mechanism that protected you in the past is the thing making it harder to be present right now. Understanding the mechanism is where the shift begins. Not fixing it, not suppressing it, understanding it. In the final chapter, we're going to update the model. Not delete the imagination. Redirect it. That's the whole thing. We've covered a lot of ground. Let me tell you what I actually think. The goal is not to stop imagining. That's not a goal. That's amputation. The research points to something called bottom-up safety. Let me explain what that actually means. The brain can't update its negative priors through willpower. It updates them through repeated evidence that the present is actually safe. 3 anchors for bottom-up safety: the body, physical regulation first; the environment, what surrounds you daily; relationships, real ones, not rehearsed ones. One more time. But it looks different now. Same architecture, different information running through it. The fractures don't disappear. The hippocampus carries the history. But gold runs through the cracks now. That's the point. You don't fight the default mode network. You give it better material, safer priors, truer stories. Look, the system is trying to grow. Let it. The glitch kept you alive. Now, it's time to update the software. The imagination is not the enemy. Summer's framework points to one thing: redirect it. Give it truer material to work with. That's what we do here at Wired Behavior. We ruin your self-blame with neuroscience. Every single time. If this helped, share it with someone who's been pacing their apartment alone. You were never crazy. You were surviving.